Everybody loves a good mystery, but what happens when that mystery never has its satisfying ending, the unveiling of the culprit? The following unsolved police cases are so strange, creepy, and frustrating, authorities and the public have been left without conclusion for decades. Today, we're going to be looking at some of the most mysterious cold cases that haunted the 20th century and have become some of the more baffling, unsolved mysteries of our time. These are definitely not for the faint-hearted, so viewer discretion is advised. Without any further ado, let's get into it. On February 25th, 1957, a young pheasant hunter set out to check his traps in a near park just north of Philadelphia. As he moved through the bushes, he didn't just find his traps, he found a small cardboard box lying discarded on the ground. What was inside that box would haunt him forever. Inside the box was the naked body of a boy wrapped in a blanket. Fearing that the police would confiscate his traps if he alerted them to the box, the young hunter ignored it and resumed hunting. The police were never alerted by the young hunter. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure the first thing that I would be doing is dialing 999 and following that a counsellor. Thankfully, just a few days later, a college student spotted a rabbit running into the underbush. Knowing that there were animal traps in the area, probably set out by that young hunter, he was concerned about the rabbit and wanted to make sure it was okay before going on his way. As he sifted through the underbrush, searching for the traps, he came across the boy in the box. Although he also feared the interaction with the police, the student reported the body to them. I don't know what's going on over there in Philadelphia, but what is everyone doing to be fearing the police, especially of something this important? To those from Philly, let me know down in the comments because I'm definitely missing something here. Given that the boy was young, between 3 and 7 years old, police were hopeful that he would be quickly identified. However, once they saw the body, their hopes for just that were quickly gone. While people would surely be looking for a missing boy who was healthy, well cared for, and clearly loved, it was unlikely that they would be looking for a scrawny, dirty, malnourished one. Unfortunately, it seemed that the last moments of the young boy's life must have been very difficult, as the boy in the box was just that. His hair was matted and seemed to be recently cut, as clumps of it were still clung onto the boy's body. The young boy was severely skeletal and covered with surgical scars, most notably on his ankle, groin, and chin, where he had a large L-shaped scar. Despite the fact that he looked abandoned, police fingerprinted him, hoping to find a match. Sadly, no one did. Over the next several years, over 400,000 flyers were sent out across Philadelphia, as well as other towns in Pennsylvania. A forensic facial reconstruction was done, and a drawing of a happy young boy was included on all of the posters. Flyers were posted in police stations, post offices, and even included in the envelopes with gas bills, but still, no one came forward with any information whatsoever. The crime scene itself was searched several times, but apart from many items of the little boy's clothing, there were no leads to anything or anyone. To this day, with all of the new technology, the boy's identity remains as much as a mystery as it was in 1957. Though the case has run cold, the publicity and interest in the case by amateur investigators have brought to light a few notable theories throughout the years. In 1960, an employee of the medical examiner's office was told by a psychic that the boy in the box had come from a local foster home. The police inquired about the boy in the box at the foster home and found blankets similar to the one he had been wrapped in hanging on the clothesline, as well as a bassinet that was sold in the same box that the boy had been found in. The employee theorized that the boy had been born to the daughter of the man who ran the foster home and that his death had been accidental. Despite the employee's insistence of these facts, no connection was ever made between the boy in the box and the foster home. It wasn't until over 40 years later that another shocking theory emerged. A woman, referred to only as M, came forward claiming that the boy had been purchased by her abusive mother and abused for several years in her home. M claimed that after the boy vomited up his dinner of baked beans, her mother had bashed his head against a wall as a punishment. Then she attempted to bathe him, during which he had died. The police initially followed this lead as there were remains of baked beans in the boy's stomach and his fingers appeared to be water wrinkled. These were both pieces of information that were never shared with the public. They were also encouraged by M's description of the boy as a small child with long hair. This fit with the theory that his hair had been recently chopped, as well as an old testimony from a man who claimed to have seen the boy being placed in the box near the woods. Unfortunately, police eventually let the theory slide as they were unable to verify M's claims. After looking into M's background, they found a history of severe mental illness. When they attempted to corroborate her claims with neighbours and friends, all of them denied ever seeing a child in their home. The theory was eventually dismissed as ridiculous. Several other theories have been presented over the years, though all of them have been eventually discounted. It seems that the mystery of the boy in the box might never be solved, and that the gravestone named America's Unknown Child could remain that way forever. What do you guys think about the theories? Do you have your own? If so, please let me know what you think happened to the boy in the box down in the comments below. On the morning of January 15th, 1947, a mother taking her child for a walk in a Los Angeles neighborhood stumbled across a gruesome sight: the body of a young naked woman sliced clean in half at the waist. The corpse was so pale and drained of blood that the woman who found the body just a few feet away mistook it for a mannequin at first. The body was cut with surgical precision, leaving no trauma to internal organs and bones. Her face was also cut from her mouth to ears, leaving an eerie, permanent smile. Despite the extensive mutilation all over the body, there wasn't a drop of blood at the scene, indicating that the young woman had been killed elsewhere. The investigation was led by the LA Police Department, and it was apparent that they needed the help of the FBI to identify the young lady who had been murdered. In just 56 minutes of contact with the FBI, the young woman was identified as 22-year-old Elizabeth Short. Elizabeth was an aspiring actress who moved from Massachusetts to LA to make it big at the age of 19. It turns out that her only starring role was in the nightmares of the people who found her body in Leimert Park in Hollywood on January 15th. She was later dubbed the Black Dahlia by the press for her rumoured taste for jet black clothes and for the Blue Dahlia, which was a crime movie out at the time. The press also tried to claim her murder was a consequence of her sexual looseness, with some papers going so far as to imply that she had been a sex worker. It was later revealed that Short had a genital anomaly that would have made normal intercourse impossible. After obtaining Elizabeth's prints, she was already in the FBI's database twice. Her first log in the system was when she had applied for a job as a clerk at the commissary of the Army's Camp Cook in California in January 1943. The second time it was logged was because she had been arrested by the Santa Barbara police for underage drinking 7 months later than her job application. The department also had her mugshot in its files and provided it to the press. The FBI ran record checks on potential suspects and conducted interviews across the nation, but no one was of interest at the time. Looking further into it, and based on early suspicions that the murderer may have had skills in dissection because the body was so cleanly cut, agents were also asked to check out a group of students at the University of Southern Carolina Medical School. Still, nothing. 9 days after she was discovered, an envelope was sent to the examiner containing individually cut and pasted letters from magazines and newspapers. It read, "The Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers. Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." As promised, the envelope contained Schultz's social security card, birth certificate, photographs, and an address book with pages missing, and the name Mark Hansen embossed on the cover. Gasoline was also used to clean the objects, removing the fingerprints. There was some left on the letter, but the prints weren't in the FBI's files. 1 month after Elizabeth was found, a suicide note scribbled in pencil on a bit of paper was found tucked in a shoe in a pile of men's clothing by the ocean's edge at the foot of Breeze Avenue in Venice. The note read, "To who it may concern, I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but I have not been found. I am too much of a coward to turn myself in, so this is the best way out for me. I couldn't help myself for that, or this. Sorry, Mary." The pile of clothing was first seen by the beach caretaker, who reported the discovery to a lifeguard captain, John Dillon, who immediately notified the West Los Angeles police station. After many examinations, unfortunately, the clothes gave no clue about the identity of the owner. It's also worth mentioning that around the time of the murder, accusations went all the way to actor Orson Welles, who allegedly paid off charges in the past and may have killed Elizabeth because of his known persona at the time, but more importantly, because a mannequin resembling her is bisected in his film The Lady from Shanghai. Straight after the public was notified of the murder, around 50 people claimed they killed Schultz. Although many suspects were named, authorities were not able to identify the Black Dahlia's killer, and the mystery has gone unsolved for over 70 years. Who killed the Black Dahlia and why? It's still a mystery. On January 22nd, 1935, a man calling himself Roland T. Owen checked into the hotel President in Kansas City, Missouri. He was described as showing up with no luggage and being 20 to 35 years old, who had brown hair, a scar on his scalp visible above the ear, and a case of cauliflower ear. He was also said to have been nicely dressed in a black coat and received the room key for room 1046. A maid called Mary said Owen allowed her to clean his room whilst he was there, but asked not to lock the door behind her because his friend was about to visit very soon. Mary said that he kept the blinds tightly drawn and the lights off, with the exception of one dim lamp. Other staff members who entered the room mentioned the same detail. Mary also made a strange observation that Owen seemed to be worried about something or afraid. He always wanted to keep in the dark and always found the shadow in the room when she was there. At 4 p.m, Mary returned to room 1048 with fresh towels to find Owen laying on the bed, completely dressed in the dark, with the door unlocked. She also saw a note on the door that read, "Don, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." The next day, on which was January the 3rd, Mary came back to clean the room that morning. She noticed that the door had been locked from the outside and assumed Owen had locked it while he was leaving the room. When she opened the door, Owen was sitting inside, again with the lights off, which meant someone else had locked the door from the outside of the room. When Mary was cleaning, Owen answered a phone call and said, "No, Don, I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry. I just had breakfast," repeating, "No, I'm not hungry." Later that evening, Mary headed up to bring fresh towels to room 1048 and heard two male voices coming from inside the room. When she knocked on the door, she heard what she described as a rough voice say, "Who is it?" She then explained that she had fresh towels and the voice replied, "We don't need any." During the night, a woman staying opposite room 1048 would report hearing loud noises, both male and female, cursing on the same floor, though there was a party going on that night in room 1055. The next morning, on January the 4th, around 7 AM, the hotel switchboard operator noticed that Owen's phone was off the hook for quite some time without being in use, so she sent a bellboy, Randolph, to go see what was up. Despite the door having a do not disturb sign, Randolph knocked several times and heard the voice saying, "Come in and turn on the lights." However, the door was locked and no one was getting up to let the bellboy in, so after knocking repeatedly, Randolph yelled, "Put the phone back on the hook," assuming that Owen was drunk. About an hour and a half later, around 8:30 AM, the phone was still off the hook and another bellboy named Harold let himself in the room with a passkey. Using only the light from the hall, Harold discovered Owen lying on the bed, naked and assumedly drunk. He also noticed that the bedding was severely darkened around Owen. The phone stand was kicked down on the ground, so he fixed it and put the phone back onto the receiver. From 10:30 to 10:45 AM, the phone was once again off the receiver, so they sent the bellboy Randolph to resolve the situation. So Randolph annoyingly started to make his way back to room 1045. When he opened the door, he saw a truly disturbing scene. Randolph told the police, "When I entered the room, the man was within 2 feet of the door, on his knees and elbows, holding his head in his hands. I saw blood on his head. I then turned the light on. I looked around and saw blood on the walls, on the bed, and in the bathroom. This frightened the hell out of me, and I immediately left the room and went downstairs and called for help." It turns out that Owen had been bound with a cord around his neck, wrist and ankles. His neck had bruising, which suggested that someone had been attempting to strangle him. He had been stabbed more than once in the chest, above the heart, and a wound puncturing his lung. Blows to his head had left him with a skull fracture on the right side. In addition to the blood the bellboy had seen, there was also some additional spatter on the ceiling. When police arrived, they cut the cords from Owen's wrist and asked him who had done this to him, where he responded, "Nobody." When investigators came and asked the injured man who had been in his room with him, he had answered, "Nobody," and explained that he just fell against the tub. Owen was brought to the hospital where the doctors assessed his injuries. He was completely comatose by the time he arrived and died shortly after midnight on January the 5th. The doctor concluded that the injuries were sustained approximately 6 to 7 hours before he was discovered, right about the time when his hotel room phone was off the hook. Since Owen claimed that nobody was in the room with him, detectives investigated a suicide angle. However, no weapons were found in his room, so that theory was quickly discarded. Upon further investigation, fingerprints belonging to a female were found on Owen's hotel room phone. Investigators discovered that the man who was killed wasn't really Roland T. Owen. The case made headlines, and many people who had been missing loved ones checked to see if the mysterious man could be the one they are looking for. A couple of months after the man's death, the case went cold and he was yet to be identified. It was announced in the newspaper that he was to be buried in a pauper's grave, but the funeral home received a call from an unknown person who requested for the man not to be buried yet and said that the funds would be sent for a proper funeral service. A few weeks later, the funeral home received the funds to cover the funeral, along with a card that read, "Love forever, Louise." In 1936, Ruby Ogletree's friend saw a photo of Roland T. Owen in a magazine that featured his mysterious death. The friend showed Ruby the photo and she identified Owen as his son, 17-year-old Artemus Ogletree. He was identified with the scar on the left side of his head as well as the cauliflower ear. In 1935, After Artemis's death, Ruby started getting typewritten letters about her son's travels. She found it strange because Artemis didn't know how to use a typewriter. Furthermore, the writing and words used didn't sound like her son's. She received several typewritten letters from Chicago, Europe, New York, among other places. The case of Artemis Ogletree still remains one of the most baffling mysteries to this day. And even with the pieces of evidence and accounts to those involved, people can only speculate on what really happened. That wraps up today's story. I hope you're as mind baffled as I am of these cold cases we covered today. If you like this sort of content, please let me know in the comments down below and subscribe to the channel because we're going to be uploading part 2 very soon. So hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one.